Hi, hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Maddie. I like to read books, obviously. For today's video, I'm going to do my top favorite reads of 2024, and I'm also going to talk about some of my least favorite reads of 2024. I'm going to primarily focus on my favorite books because I want to talk about those the most, but I will include some of my least favorite books at the end. I'm filming this on December 18th. I've read 138 books this year, which, yes, I know, is a lot. And my only explanation is I went through a tough time. So I like to read books during tough times. This is the most books I have ever read in a year in my entire life, but I'm super excited to talk about my favorites and explain why they're my favorites. I'm going to start with the first book that I read in 2024, which is The 7-Year Slip. I love this book so much. Basically, it's a contemporary romance with time travel. The main character, Clementine, moves into her late aunt's apartment, and all her life she has heard stories that the apartment is magical, and she never really believed them until one day she walked into the apartment and she walked 7 years in the past, and there is a stranger man who is also staying there. Stranger yet handsome. But I love this book. I thought it was so well written. I love the discussions of grief throughout the book. I thought that was very well handled. I love the romance. I love the time travel components. I love the discussion of Clementine's life and career. This is a romance book where it's more than the romance itself, and those tend to be my most favorite romance books just because it feels deeper and more meaningful, and this book definitely checked all the boxes for me. 5 stars. I love it so much. The next book, or actually the next two books, but it's the Shepherd King duology, which includes One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. My personal favorite of the two was Two Twisted Crowns. I rated this one 5 stars. One Dark Window was 4.5 stars. But I loved the duology overall. I loved the gothic vibes. I thought it was so atmospheric. I loved the characters, the romance, and the magic system. I found the magic system to be pretty unique, and it had actual consequences, which I feel like is rare in a fantasy series these days. But if you didn't know, One Dark Window is about Elspeth. She has a mercurial spirit living inside her head, and she calls him the Nightmare. One day, she meets this mysterious highwayman, and it changes her life for the course of the whole duology. She's essentially thrown into this quest-like adventure to save the village from the dark mist that has been infecting it. I will forever kick myself for not reading this duology sooner. I've known about it for some time, but it just never interested me for whatever reason. But when I started reading it, I was immediately hooked into the books and the characters and the plot. So you definitely need to pick it up if you haven't already. It's such a good duology. One of my favorite fantasy duologies ever. Speaking of books that I have known about for a long time, and I will forever kick myself for not reading sooner, the Cruel Prince trilogy. I finally read the Cruel Prince trilogy this year after knowing about it for several years and just never being interested enough in picking it up. And 2024 was the year that I finally read it. For whatever reason, I wasn't really interested by the premise of it, and I thought I wasn't going to like it. But I was wrong. If you didn't know, the Cruel Prince trilogy, it's essentially like a political fantasy book, and it definitely has a subplot of romance. It's a true enemies to lovers, in my opinion, because the main characters, Jude and Cardan, are enemies. They are enemies. They don't like each other. They hate each other, which was honestly kind of fun to read about. But I loved the trilogy overall. I rated every single book 4.5 stars. I thought it was so fun, and I thought the politics were fun too because it was all about bargains and strategy. I love the main character, Jude. I thought she was so strong, but also had a hidden, sensitive, and loyal side to her. And of course, I did love the eventual romance that happened. This book does have fairies in them, and I would say they follow more of the traditional folklore fairies as opposed to Sarah J. Maas fairies. Not that I'm insulting that, it's just a different type of fairy in the Cruel Prince trilogy, and I really enjoyed it because I love the folklore vibes of this series. Next, can you guess it? It's another fantasy series. It's the Raven Cycle series. I read the entire series this year. I only have the first book, The Raven Boys, with me because I thrifted this very beat up copy of it, and I read the rest of the series through my library. But The Raven Boys and the Raven Cycle series was such an unexpected favorite series of mine. I truly did not know how much I was going to fall in love with the series and the characters until I actually started reading it. This is a YA fantasy paranormal-ish series. It follows the main character Blue, or at least the first book does. And Blue is from a clairvoyant family who all have abilities, except Blue herself. She does not have any abilities until one night she actually sees a soon-to-be dead person, and his name is Gansey. He's a rich student at this private all-boys school in town, and of course Blue has a policy of staying away from those private rich boy students that she dubs as the Raven Boys. Of course, Blue is drawn to Gansey because she saw his soon-to-be dead ghost, and from there she is thrusted into his friend group and a quest-like adventure to find the sleeping Welsh king. I feel like it's so hard to describe the premise of this book because there's a lot of different moving pieces happening, but it's so good. This book has the best found family I have ever read in a book and or series. Every single character felt so unique and distinct from one another, which I feel like is so rare in series these days. It has the best characterization. I love the plot so much. I thought it was so fun because it's like an adventure with your friends during the summer. I really enjoyed every single book in this series as well. I will say with the first book, it did take me a little bit of time to get into the book and just the writing style and everything that was happening, but once I got into the book, I was so invested in it and the series overall. If you love a YA series and you haven't read this before, you need to pick it up. You need to read it. The next book is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. I actually read the entire trilogy this year, but my favorite is definitely the first book, Belladonna. I rated this one 5 stars. It's essentially a gothic murder mystery with romance, and that's all of my favorite elements within one book. But this follows the main character Signa, and for all her life she has known death, and every guardian she has had has mysteriously passed away. So when her most recent guardian randomly passes away, she has to move in with the only remaining family member that she has left. And she moves into their family estate, which is called Thorn Grove. And at this estate, the matriarch of the family has also mysteriously passed away, and Signa makes a alliance with death itself in order to solve the mystery. Like I said, this book has all the gothic vibes. It definitely has the most gothic vibes out of the entire series, in my opinion. Love the estate. It felt so real and alive. I love the characters. I love the romance. I love the murder mystery plotline. That was fun as well. I feel like there was so much excitement in this book, and I loved it so much. My most recent 5-star read was The Unmaking of June Farrow. This is another contemporary romance with time travel. If you can't tell, I love that subgenre. It does something for me every time. This book, I think you should go into not knowing a ton about it, so I'm not going to explain the plot of the book. Just know it's a romance and has time travel. Loved this book so much. I thought it was so well written. It was so engaging. I was hooked from the very first page. I loved the romance in this book. I thought it was so heartwarming and heartbreaking all at the same time. So all the good ingredients of a good romance. I love this book so much. If you haven't read it and you're interested in reading it, then you should definitely pick it up. The next book is a little bit of a diversion of what I've been talking about so far, at least genre-wise. It's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This was another 5-star read for me. I think a lot of people are going to say that this is a love story, and I would disagree with that assessment of this book. I feel like this is not really a love story, but it's more of like a gothic and fractured tale about generational trauma and the dark side of like a toxic romance. But I was actually kind of surprised about how much I loved Wuthering Heights. I thought it was so well written. I loved the narrative structure of it. I loved the characters just because of how absurd they were. It was honestly kind of funny to read about sometimes. It made me laugh, and it definitely has some good quotes and one liners in this book as well. Personally, I loved it. It's a 5-star read for me. Another favorite is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. I rated this 4.5 stars, but don't get that twisted. I still really loved it. I'm just a harsh rater. This is another gothic fantasy, but I will say the fantasy elements are a bit more on the lighter side. So don't go reading this book expecting like a lot of fantasy elements because they're not really there. This book feels like a fairy tale and a story within a story, so if you love that vibe, then you will probably love this book. Like I said, it has gothic elements in it, so it's a little bit darker. It follows the main character Effie, and she wins the contest of redesigning her favorite author's estate. But upon arrival to that estate, she finds another student from her school who was already there, and he's trying to prove that her favorite author was a fraud. And I feel like that's all you should know about this book before you start reading it, and just let the story take you for a ride because it definitely shocked me at some points. I was not expecting all that happened in this book to happen, but I really enjoyed it. One thing that I enjoy about Ava Reed books and her writing style is that it makes you feel so many emotions, and just I love the eerie vibes of this book and just the amount of dread that it filled me with, which sounds kind of weird to say out loud, but I feel like if a book makes you feel such strong emotions, then it's a good book. There is a romance in this book, but I would say it's more of a subplot of romance. This book really focuses on the main character Effie and her journey and just like the plot overall. But I love a good subplot of romance, so it did it for me. The next book I don't have a physical copy of yet because it's on my Christmas list, but it's My Throat an Open Grave. This book was a immediate 5-star read for me. I think it's under 300 pages, which is kind of shocking that the author was able to write such a cohesive and good story under 300 pages and make me feel so many emotions and fall in love with the characters. Kind of crazy. But this book is a gothic YA horror novel, and it follows the main character who wishes her baby brother to be taken away. And it actually works because the Lord of the Woods ends up kidnapping her baby brother. In order to save her baby brother, she has to essentially cross the veil into the woods to save him. But like I mentioned, I loved the story. I was hooked. Page one, I was hooked into the story. It was so good. I love the plot. I love the characters. I love the mystery. I will say the book is not really scary, but it does have some horror elements in it. Don't expect like the scariest book ever. But overall, I loved the book. Nobody ever talks about it, but it is such a good book. Another 5-star read for me was Where the Dark Stands Still. This is can you guess it, a YA fantasy gothic book. Definitely inspired by Howl's Moving Castle, and I love Howl's Moving Castle, so of course I love this book as well. The vibes of this book are so good. It has a sentient manor, a dark and magical forest, found family, spirits. It has all of my favorite elements in a book. I love the main character, I love the romance, I love the plot. It made me cry a little bit, and I don't really cry for books. But if you want a gothic book that has folklore vibes and House Moving Castle vibes, then you need to pick up this book. It was so good. You will not be disappointed. And if you are disappointed by this book, no, you were not. Rethink your opinion. If you know me, you know I love Emily Henry. So when I read Funny Story this year, I fell in love with the book. It follows the main character Daphne, who gets broken up with by her fiance, or I guess now ex-fiance. And because she was living at his house, she has to move out. And her new roommate is the ex-boyfriend of the girl that her ex-fiance is now dating. Does that make sense? It's very convoluted. Anyways, the story is not really about that, but more about Daphne and the MMC Miles and their relationship and their romance. Like I mentioned with the 7 Year Slip, I love a contemporary romance that is more than just the romance itself. This book definitely deals with female friendships, being an overthinker, and having complicated and kind of bad relationship with a parental figure, and all of those things really hit home for me. So I love this book. This book did make me sob, like sob, so 5 stars. Last but definitely not least, if you couldn't tell by all my tabs, I loved this series, but I'm only going to hold up the first book because all these books are freaking heavy. That's the Magnolia Parks Universe by Jessa Hastings. I read the entire series this year. Well, I reread the first 2 books and then read the last 3 books for the first time. And what a journey this entire series was. I always say that the Magnolia Parks universe is like British Gossip Girl, and I feel like that's the most accurate description of these books. If you want drama between rich people and socialites, then I feel like you will love this book because there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of relationship drama, both romantic and friendship wise, but mostly romantic. And definitely every single character is going to make a bad decision or more bad decisions that are going to annoy you, but hear me out. The growth of all the characters have been just so amazing to read about. It is really a journey with all of these characters. You go through so many things with them, and it'll make you feel so many things. It made me feel every single emotion. It made me laugh. It made me cry. Remember when I said I don't really cry during books, and like I mentioned 3 books this year that I've cried during? But I definitely understand that this book in the series is not going to be for everyone, and that's okay because I loved it. But that wraps up my favorite books that I read in 2024. Now on to just a few of my least favorite books that I read in 2024. The first one I do own a physical copy of, but I am quite honestly too lazy to grab it. It's The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I know this is a favorite for a lot of people because the story and the characters and just the themes of the book really resonate with a lot of people. This book just wasn't for me personally. I will say I do think it was well written, but I find a lot of things that happened or were said in this book were very problematic. Unfortunately, hindered my ability to enjoy this book. I think I rated it like 2.5 stars. So, yeah. Another book that is the complete genre shift, but it's Hopeless by Elsie Silver. This is part of the Chestnut Springs series. Overall, I actually really liked the series. I thought it was fun. It's about cowboys. I wasn't expecting to like the cowboys because in real life I don't like cowboys, to be quite honest, but I thought the series was fun and I really enjoyed it. And one of my favorite side characters of the series was Beau, so I was really excited to get to his book, which was the last of the series, Hopeless, and I was so disappointed by it. I did not like the main tropes that this book deals with. It's essentially a virginal heroine in an age gap romance, and those 2 tropes were brought up so many times throughout the book that it was so annoying. I was really disappointed by it, so I rated it 2 stars, which is really unfortunate. The next book, which is actually part of a series, it's Defend the Dawn, which is part of the Defy the Night series. With book 1, Defy the Night, I actually rather enjoyed that book. I rated it 3.5 stars. If you didn't know, Defy the Night is a Robin Hood retelling, and if you didn't know, Robin Hood is essentially stealing from the rich and giving back to the poor. And I felt like that message and that theme was really in the first book, Defy the Night, and by the time the second book happened, Defend the Dawn, it was thrown out the window. I honestly just didn't like how the rebellion was painted in such a negative and poor light. It just felt so different from the first book. Also, there was a random love triangle that was tried in Defend the Dawn, and it did not work out at all, and it was completely resolved by the end of the book, so, like, why was it added in the first place? Defend the Dawn honestly felt like a filler book, so hopefully I like the third and final book better, but we will find out. The last book that I'm going to talk about in my least favorite reads of 2024, this is the only book that I rated 1 star this year. If you saw my reading vlog of me reading holiday books, you already know how I feel about this, but it's All by My Elf. It's part of the Amazon miniseries collection Under the Mistletoe. This was my least favorite in that entire collection. Like I said, it's a 1 star. The novella is only 50 pages long, but it was 50 pages too long. It felt like a bad sitcom. I was so confused about what I was reading the entire 50 pages. Also, the two main characters are supposedly in their late 30s, but they play Never Have I Ever. Why? Also, they hook up in the back of like the hot dog, whatever, mobile truck during a really, really bad traffic pileup. And just like, why? Why? If I was in that traffic pileup in like the next car over for them and I see that happening, that would be my last straw. Anyways, if you couldn't tell, I did not like it at all. I'm sure there's somebody out there who liked it. That person was not me. Anyways, enough ranting about my least favorite books. Hopefully you found a new book from my favorite reads of 2024. I feel like there's so many good books in that list, and hopefully you find one that you want to read in 2025. But I'm going to stop talking now. I've been talking for like the last 30 minutes and I'm done. I'm done talking. That concludes this video of my favorite reads and a few of my least favorite reads of 2024. Overall, 2024 was a great year for me reading wise, just in terms of like the volume of books that I read, but also the quality, because I found a lot of new favorite books from this year, so I'm very happy regardless. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you want to follow me elsewhere, I'm also on TikTok and Instagram, the same account name, MaddieRead6. And until next time, I'll see you later.